Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
Being alone at home can get boring fast, even after 18 years of marriage. When my alarm buzzed early Monday morning, I turned it off and instinctively reached over to cuddle and kiss Lena before heading to the shower. Then I remembered, she was still away at the Eastern Wellness Fair and wouldn't return until Tuesday. With the kids off at camp for the next 3 weeks, the house was completely empty. I groaned, stretched, and got ready to face another day. I was going to have a hard time getting up the energy to make it into the office again today. It's strange, usually, I have no problem getting ready to go into work. I enjoy my job and look forward to the challenges I face each day. But this last week has been difficult. I found it hard to go into work when I knew that Lena was away at a luxurious resort enjoying the expo. I envied her. It felt like she was away on vacation while I was stuck at home. I'm not sure why this week was different. Lena is a teacher, so I've gotten used to her sleeping in while I went to work during school breaks. Nevertheless, the thought of playing hooky flashed through my mind as I drove into work that morning. I realized that what was making me envious was Lena's excitement during our daily phone conversations. She wasn't telling me about the meetings and sessions, she was talking about the fun she was having with Ella and her friends as they made the rounds of the afternoon and nighttime activities. Her call the day before had been a prime example. When she left for the expo, she was convinced that her boss, Victor, was going to try to charm her. We had talked about it and came up with a strategy for dealing with Victor if he did try anything. By Friday's call, she had decided that Victor had given up on his plans, so she was free to enjoy the remainder of the expo in peace. The rest of the phone call was a blur. She went on and on about her plans with great excitement. She was so happy and excited that I could barely get a word in edgewise. I don't think she even thought about how I would react. I was happy she was having a good time, but deep down I resented the fact that she could have such a good time without me. It sounded like she had forgotten she was a wife and mother. I wondered if she thought about me at all once she hung up the phone. A further irritation came from her companions. During our call on Friday, she had talked about what a good time she'd had dancing the past few nights. When I asked whom she was dancing with, she rattled off the names of 4 guys: Max, Ethan, Jack, and Owen. It turns out that her new group of friends was 4 men and 3 women. Not only was she out having a good time, but she was also getting wined and dined by some guys I didn't know. I trusted Lena, but there was something about the whole situation that caused my hackles to rise. Did they act like 4 couples when they were out together? In short, I was jealous. I was bothered by the good time that Lena was having with her new friends while I was stuck working. I was bothered by the fact that it did not appear that she missed me at all. My ego was hurting. Could I be forgotten and replaced that easily? As I sat in traffic, I thought about how I was feeling and felt foolish. I had no reason to be envious or suspicious of Lena. I was just getting burnt out and in need of a vacation myself. It had been a long time since I had gotten away from the office for more than a day or 2. I needed to get away. I was going to talk to my boss that morning, get the next week off, and surprise Lena with an impromptu vacation. It was time to dust off the camping equipment, haul out the canoe, and revisit some old haunts. I knew just the trip to take, a route through the lakes, rivers, and ponds of the Pinecrest Wilderness in northern Colorado. It was a leisurely paddle that Lena and I have enjoyed in the past. The route was not well traveled, and the chances of spotting wildlife and a variety of waterfowl were excellent. However, the best part of the trip was the fact that there were plenty of private campsites. I wanted to spend some quality time alone with Lena before Noah and Emma got back from summer camp. When I got into the office, I went to see my boss, Brian Davis. To my relief, he was willing to give me the week off, even on such short notice. He smiled at me and said, "For God's sake, Alan, it's about time you figured it out. You need a break. You've been snapping at people all summer, and that's not like you." "I know, Alex," I replied with a sigh. Between the expo that my wife is at, Emma's gymnastics camp, and Noah's soccer camp, this summer has been crazy. I didn't think I could afford to take the time off, so I've been trying to get it out. On the way in today, I realized how jealous I was of Lena being at that expo. When I start getting jealous because she gets to go to a conference for her job, then I know I'm beginning to lose it. I figured I'd better take a vacation before I do something stupid. Alex laughed and told me to enjoy myself. Take that pretty wife of yours away for a while and show her some attention. If you don't watch out, someone is going to steal her away from you. I laughed at Alex's comment and went back to my office to start my day, but his comment struck a nerve. It seemed a little too close to my worries from earlier that day. Was she missing me? Later that afternoon, I called Lena for our daily chat, but as soon as she picked up the phone, I could tell that her mood had shifted radically from the day before. She sounded jumpy, and her mind wasn't on our conversation. After talking with her for a few minutes, it was obvious that something was bothering her. "Lena, what's going on? Is something wrong?" I queried. "What? No, nothing's wrong. I'm just tired," she stammered. "Are you getting tired of cooking for yourself yet?" I knew something was up. For the last 3 days, our phone conversations had been about the expo and what a good time she was having. Now, she wouldn't talk to me. "Lena, don't try to change the subject. Something is bothering you. I can tell. What's wrong? Did something happen today?" "Alan, there is nothing wrong. Nothing happened. I told you, I'm just tired. I couldn't get to sleep last night. I had a lot on my mind and couldn't get comfortable without you to cuddle into." "What was bothering you? You were so happy yesterday. Did something happen to you after our conversation?" I pressed. "Did Victor try to hit on you again?" "I'll kill him." "No, I told you it's nothing. Victor has been a perfect gentleman. I just got to thinking about us and started to miss you." "Lena, look," she interrupted harshly, "drop it, please. I told you it was nothing for you to worry about." Lena caught herself and went on in a softer tone. "I promise I'll tell you all about it when I get home. Can we talk about something else?" I knew I wasn't going to get anything else out of her right then. After 18 years of marriage, I have learned that when Lena doesn't want to talk about something, it's not going to happen. All I could do was hope that whatever was bothering her wasn't major and would keep until she got home. I gave in and changed the subject. "So, tell me, what's on tap for today? Any special plans?" I asked. "I don't know," she replied softly. "I'm supposed to get together with Ella, Ivy, and Sophia, but I'm not sure if I'm going to go. I might just take a nap." "What about tonight? Are you heading out for another night of dinner, drinking, and dancing with the guys?" I asked sarcastically. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted saying them. I knew the tone of voice I used was bitter, but I couldn't help myself. I wasn't happy that she wouldn't talk to me about what was going on, and I didn't like the idea of her going out with a group of guys I didn't know. "What do you mean?" she yelled, picking up on my tone of voice. "Are you accusing me of something? You sound as if you're jealous." "I know," I sighed. "I think I'm jealous. It's just that all I have heard about since you got to the expo is what a great time you were having with your new friends. All day long, I've been sitting here missing you. And I know it's stupid, but I'm feeling left out and sorry for myself. I just can't stop worrying about these other guys and the good times you're having with them. I'm sorry. I'm not accusing you of anything. I love you and trust you too much for that. I know that you would never do anything to hurt our marriage. Just forget I said anything." When I finished, Lena didn't say anything for a long time. When she did speak, her voice was full of emotion. "Alan Andrews," she choked, "you're not being stupid. I love you for worrying about me. Alan, do you ever forget that I love you more than anything? You are the only man that I have ever loved, and nothing will ever change that. You have no reason to be jealous because there is no one who could ever mean as much to me as you do." After that, we said our goodbyes and hung up. As I put down the phone, I thought I heard Lena burst into tears, but I couldn't be sure. All I could do was stare at the phone. That had been one of the strangest calls I had ever had. It was obvious that something was bothering Lena, but there was nothing I could do about it until she got home. I was feeling uneasy. Her reaction to my jealousy seemed out of character. I expected her to laugh at my concerns and tease me about it. Instead, she had broken out in tears and told me not to be jealous. Was she feeling guilty about something? She never did tell me what her plans were for going out with her gentleman friends. To keep myself occupied, I threw myself into getting ready for our canoe trip. I decided to surprise Lena with the trip. By Saturday morning, I had picked up all the necessary supplies, and everything was packed, including her gear. I was going to pick her up at the airport and head directly out to the Pinecrest Wilderness. We did talk on Monday, but the conversation was short and strained at times. The only things she wanted to talk about were the meetings she'd been to that day. She didn't say a word about our conversation from the day before. She also avoided my questions on what she had done the prior night or what she planned on doing that day. I wasn't sure if she was being considerate by not rubbing my nose in the fun she was having or if she was hiding something. She did give me some big news, however. Lena had been asked to become a member of the Regional Events Committee. This was quite a coup for her and a big boost for her career. I knew she had lots of ideas she wanted to propose, and this would give her a forum where she might be able to make a difference. I was excited for her, but she seemed conflicted. When I asked her why, she told me that the duties of the committee would require her to be away 4 times a year. Committee members met each summer for 3 days prior to the expo and were required to attend quarterly meetings in the fall, winter, and spring. She would be gone for 10 or more days in the summer, and each of the quarterly meetings would mean at least 4 days away from home. Lena said she was worried about the amount of time she'd have to spend away from home. It worried me, too, but I didn't want to let her know. I didn't want to be one of those husbands who let their fears get in the way of their wife's career. She told me that she was thinking about it and that she didn't have to give them a response right away. I let the subject drop. I figured we would have a chance to talk more about it later. Lena was booked on an early flight home. Her return flight was due around noon, and I planned to leave for the trip right from the airport. We had about a 4-hour drive, and it was about an hour's paddle into the first campsite I wanted to use. When Lena got off the plane, she was happy to see me, but she looked exhausted. There was a tightness around her eyes that I did not like. She acted nervous and under stress. It was almost like she didn't know what type of reception she would get from me. I kissed her quickly and hustled her over to the luggage carousel. I was thinking of the trip. I wanted to surprise her and get on the road as quickly as possible. We lucked out, and her bag came out quickly. I grabbed it, and we walked out to the SUV. When she saw the canoe on the roof, she looked at me with a question on her face. I smiled at her and said, "Surprise." I realized a few days ago that I was getting burned out. Alex gave me next week off, and I thought we could spend it up in the Pinecrest Wilderness, relaxing. Besides, I thought we could use some time alone before the kids get back from camp. We're all set to get on the road. I even packed you a change of clothes if you want to change while we drive. Lena just looked at me. She seemed hesitant, almost apprehensive about going. I was surprised and hurt by her reaction. These trips alone have created some of my happiest memories. We were pretty sure that Noah had been conceived on one of these trips. One of my biggest regrets is that they don't happen as often as I like. We constantly bemoan the fact that we never get time to spend together. I had thought that this would be a great surprise, but it seemed that I was the one getting the surprise. Lena, look, if you don't want to go, we don't have to. We can find something else to do, I told her. I'm sure I sounded testy. My tone of voice conveyed my disappointment and irritation at her reaction. Lena flushed and looked away guiltily. She had some reason for not wanting to go on the canoe trip. However, she knew how much these trips meant. I don't think she could come up with a legitimate reason for not wanting to go. After a moment, she looked back at me with a forced smile on her face. No, it's okay. I was just surprised, that's all. Let's get going. I just stared at her. Lena, I'm serious. If you don't want to go, we won't. I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. I placed her suitcase in the car, got in, and waited for her to join me. Admittedly, I was steamed. I was also confused, but I wasn't going to make her go. I had given up on the trip and was planning on heading to the house. As Lena got in the car, I could see the tears in her eyes. She was going through an internal struggle that I could not help her with. As I left the airport, her eyes widened as she saw me take the road home. She sat there biting her lip and staring at me intently for a minute or two, and then sighed. Alan, I'm sorry. I'm being selfish. It's not that I don't want to go, it's just that I've been away for a week. I'm tired and wanted to get home. I need to talk to you, and I thought it would be easier to do it at home. But that's not fair to you. Let's go, I just need a little time to adjust. I looked over at her. Are you sure? If you want to spend some time at home and rest, we can always take a shorter trip later in the week. Lena looked at me and smiled tentatively. No, let's go now. I know you've got your plans all made, and it's not fair to you to make you change them. I'm sure I'll be okay by the time we get on the water. I took her at her word and took the next exit. It took us only a few minutes to get on the right route out of town. I had to concentrate on the traffic for a while before I could settle in and put on the cruise control. When we were all set, I relaxed a bit and looked over at Lena. You said you had something you wanted to talk to me about. Lena looked over at me and gave me a nervous smile. I just wanted to talk to you about the expo. It will keep until later. We can talk about it tonight once we make camp. Besides, I'm curious about something you said at the airport. You're feeling burned out. The next 4 hours lasted forever. Lena was determined not to talk about the expo or what was bothering her. Every time I brought it up, she would change the subject and tell me that we would talk about it later. I could tell she was hiding something, but I couldn't pin her down. The final 2 hours of the trip were spent in silence as Lena tried to nap on the seat next to me. When we got to the parking lot where we would be putting in, we quietly worked together to get the canoe off the car and loaded with the gear. We locked the car and set off for our first campsite. By now, her behavior was getting me seriously worried. Something was very wrong, and I had a feeling of dread as I tried to anticipate what she was going to tell me. When we got to the campsite, we fell into routine and set up camp, going about the chores of making dinner and getting a fire going. By unspoken agreement, we talked of inconsequential matters until we had finished eating and cleaning up. Finally, as dusk settled around us and we sat staring into the campfire, I knew that it was time to bring the matter into the open. Enough is enough, Lena. Can you please tell me what in the hell is going on? What's bothering you? You've been acting strange since I talked to you last Monday. Lena looked over at me. She was on the verge of tears and was sitting hunched over with her legs curled up. She looked totally miserable. Alan, I have a confession to make. I did a stupid, horrible thing at the expo. I hope you can forgive me. Lena looked down at her feet and whispered, I had sex with Max. With this pronouncement, Lena burst into tears and buried her head into her arms. For what felt like an eternity, I just sat there and stared at her. All the insecurities and worries that had been plaguing me since she started talking about the men at the expo came flooding back. My worst nightmares had come true. She had gone to the expo, forgotten about me, and replaced me emotionally. I was in turmoil. Her announcement had come as a complete surprise. While I had been jealous of her spending time with guys I didn't know, I never imagined she would cheat on me. I was devastated and angry. What the hell do you mean you had sex with Max? I shouted. How could you do this to me? I'm normally in control of my emotions, but for a while, I lost it. Lena just sat there crying, curled up in a ball. With every insult I hurled at her, she flinched and slipped deeper into misery. She didn't even try to defend herself. Finally, my outburst burned itself out, and I sat back down and stared at her coldly. At that moment, I wasn't sure what I felt for Lena or what to do next. I still loved her, but I hated her too. I hated what she had done to us. Her confession destroyed me emotionally and devastated the trust one had in her. Do you have any explanation for yourself? I demanded. Lena looked up at me and whispered, I'm so sorry. I don't care if you're sorry. I just want to know what happened and if you can give me a reason for it, I snarled. Over the course of the evening, Lena haltingly told me her story. She explained her relief at finding Ella's name on the expo list and her surprise at finding that 4 of Ella's friends were men. She told me what they talked about and how she had grown comfortable with them. She even told me that she thought about one of them trying something but had been sure she could handle it. She was totally miserable as she talked. I just sat there and stared at her as she spoke. She confirmed some of my fears. She admitted that she had enjoyed the social aspects of the expo far too much for my liking. She had been flattered by the attention she'd been getting from the guys. She shamefacedly admitted that there were times when she felt like she was single. She was aware that she and Max were pairing up but didn't worry about it. She let her guard down with Max because she trusted him not to try anything. The hardest part of all was hearing about Saturday night. She didn't go into details about the sex she had with Max. She didn't have to. I was hurt enough by her story of how she had willingly ignored the warning signs and let Max seduce her. the situation seemed surreal. She said she noticed how the others had quickly drifted away to their own activities, leaving her with Max. She knew she should have left, but she just sat there and let it happen. She believed that Max would never cheat on his wife and told me why. She didn't convince me, and by her tone of voice, I think that we both knew she was deluding herself on some level. She had to know what was going to happen that night if she stayed with Max. To her credit, she didn't try to shift the blame for her actions to anyone else or pretend that she hadn't done anything wrong. She guiltily acknowledged that she could not have been seduced if she hadn't been receptive to it. She took responsibility for her actions and just told me how it happened, how Max seduced her gradually until her libido was in a place where she would accept his advances, and how feeble her efforts were to stop him. She cried as she admitted that she willingly went with Max to have sex. She started to tell me what happened between her and Max in his bedroom, but I stopped her when she started to describe how they undressed each other. I was disgusted. I had no desire to hear a blow-by-blow account of her sexual misconduct. The only thing that made hearing any of the details bearable was the fact that she was suffering as much as I was. Telling me about it did not excite either of us, it hurt her as much as it hurt me. When I told her to stop, that I didn't want to hear about the sex, she flashed me a grateful smile, but then she gasped and told me that she did need to tell me something else about that night. The last part of her story was incredible. She told me that after she'd had sex with Max, they went back out into the living area of the suite and met up with Ella and Ethan. The mental image of my wife sitting down in nothing but a robe with another woman and two men was incomprehensible to me. While Lena was not exactly body shy, she had never been an exhibitionist. Max, Ethan, and Ella had told her something in confidence. They asked her never to repeat the story because too many people could be hurt, but she didn't want to keep any secrets from me. She had to tell me the whole story. She had fallen in with what can only be described as a group of swingers. She gave me the history and the absurd rules they had created for their affairs, even going through all of the rationalizations they used to justify their actions. Her voice shook as she told me their argument that the sex was only for fun and did not have to affect her marriage. She described their methods of hiding their escapades and their attempts to persuade her that it could be hidden from me. They believed that the sex was meaningless to the marriage as long as no emotional bonds were formed. That was when she dropped her final bombshell of the evening. I knew she had been invited to join the regional events committee. What I didn't know was that the committee was the method by which they got together. She had been invited to join their group after they asked her to join the committee. Max had asked her to spend the night with him again. He wanted more sex, but she refused, although she admitted that she was still aroused and tempted to stay. However, she told me that she was confused, guilty, and scared, and needed time alone to think. She didn't know what to think about their arrangement, and she didn't know how to respond to the offer. She was feeling guilty for giving in to temptation with Max, and now they were asking her to knowingly enter into a long-term arrangement. Although they did their best to convince her it was not really cheating on me, she was skeptical of their arguments. Her confusion and her skepticism were enough to overcome her arousal, so she left. Besides, she said she felt that sleeping with Max would have created a level of intimacy she did not want. She thought that sleeping and cuddling with him would be a bigger betrayal than the sex. When Lena finished describing Saturday night, she just sat there, drawn into herself, staring into the embers of our campfire. I sat there, mulling over what I had heard. I had questions about her behavior, but I dreaded hearing her answers. Finally, I stirred and asked her, "What about the rest of the week? Did you go back and see him again on Monday night? Is that why you refused to tell me what you were doing?" Lena winced at the accusing tone of my question and looked up at me with a pained look on her face. I deserve that, but no, I only had sex with him on Saturday night. After I left the suite, I spent the night tossing and turning, thinking about what I had done and what I was going to do, she admitted. Alan, I'm sorry to say this, but I did think about their offer. The sex was physical and nothing at all like the way we make love. It was just another way to have fun, like dancing or playing a game. It didn't have any special significance. It was so casual that it seemed like just another social activity that I could choose from. I don't love Max and didn't make love to him. You are the only man I have ever made love to. I know it's a cliché, but it was just physical, just sex. I almost convinced myself that this was okay. I kept on thinking about their claim that this didn't really count as cheating because it was just friends with benefits. It didn't mean anything emotionally, it was just another benefit of being at the expo. I found myself thinking about what Max had told me and wondering if it would really hurt you if I had sex with someone else while I was away at the expo. I knew that no amount of sex with Max could affect the way I loved you or the way I felt about our marriage. After all, what you didn't know couldn't hurt you, right? Lena shook her head, disgusted with herself, and went on. I don't know what I was thinking. I had breakfast with Ella on Monday. I was confused and had a lot of questions about what was going on. When Max came over, it felt really strange. I didn't know how to respond, even though he treated me the same way he had been treating me all along. I felt like I had a big sign around my neck telling the whole world I had cheated on you. I wasn't entirely truthful on the phone with you on Monday. I had made plans at breakfast to get together with Ella, Ivy, and Sophia in Ella's room to talk. I wanted to get my questions answered. I needed to talk to them about their arrangement and how they could manage to do it. I really wanted to talk to Sophia and see how it affected her relationship with her husband. Lena took a deep breath. I'm not sure, but I think that Ella had invited the guys to come over later in the afternoon. Lena stopped for a moment and looked at me intently. Alan, I know I acted like an idiot and did some real foolish things last week, but I need you to know one thing: I love you more than anything and could never do anything to intentionally hurt you. Even when I was being a fool and trying to believe what they had told me, I was thinking about you, too. Their offer was tempting, but it was the whole package that made it exciting. I had so much fun with them, and the sex was just another part of it. They were asking me to join them and have a lot of fun. It was like being given the chance to join some exclusive club. I found myself wondering if I could accept the sex as part of being in the group. It wasn't what made me want to join them, it was almost like a price I had to pay. But no matter how I was tempted, I could never do it if there was even the slightest chance it would hurt you or our marriage. That is why I wanted to talk to Sophia and Ivy. Then I talked to you and realized what a fool I was. I didn't need to talk to Sophia or Ivy, I just needed to think about us. When I got off the phone with you, I just started to cry. No matter how I justified it, it would affect our marriage because I would know that I was cheating on you. Even if I could hide it from you, I couldn't hide it from myself. It would have to affect our marriage because it would affect me. I couldn't believe I had even thought about joining them. When you told me how much you loved and trusted me never to do anything to hurt our marriage, I felt like here you were, apologizing for doubting me when I had just betrayed your trust. I felt like dying because I knew that I had let you down. I called Ella and told her that I didn't want to see her or her friends anymore. I told her that I was out and that I was disgusted with myself for cheating on you. The last 2 days, I spent in my room crying and trying to decide what I was going to do to make this up to you. That's why I didn't tell you about what I had been doing on the phone. I wanted to talk to you face to face. I only left my room to go to the sessions I had to be at. Lena looked at me with tears in her eyes. Alan, I love you more than anything, and I don't want to lose you. I know that I made a horrible mistake and hurt you terribly. I'm so sorry and hope that you're able to forgive me. When Lena finished, I just looked at her. Her confession had shaken me badly. It was bad enough that she had cheated on me, the idea that she had seriously considered joining this club was devastating. Why, Lena? I asked her in a pained tone. Are you unhappy with me or our marriage? Do you want out? No, she blurted out. I told you I love you more than anything. Then why did you do this? Why did you cheat on me? I asked her miserably. Lena looked at me and turned away. She couldn't stand to look at the pain in my eyes. She stared into the fire for a moment and replied, That's what I have been trying to figure out for the past 4 days. Why, Alan? This was not something that I planned to do. It just happened. I never even thought about cheating on you before. You are the only man that I have ever loved, and nothing is going to change that. The only reason that I have been able to come up with is that I was weak and gave into temptation. You know that I've had other guys come onto me before. We've talked about it. I've always been able to see right through them and tell them where to go. Lena sighed and rubbed her neck. I don't know why Max was different. The only thing I can come up with is that I thought he was safe. I wasn't on my guard with him. I didn't think he would cheat on his wife, so I let myself open up to him in ways that I normally guard against. By the time I realized where we were headed, he already had me turned on, and I just couldn't say no. I was thinking with my emotions and not my brain. All I could think about was how good he was making me feel. I wasn't thinking about the trouble that might happen in the future. All I thought about was the moment I gave in to the temptation. Lena stared at me intently for a moment. I know I screwed up, but I hope you can understand how it could have happened. Haven't you ever been tempted before? Haven't you ever done something wrong just because you couldn't help yourself? I didn't answer her. I was still looking for answers to my questions. Even if I accept the idea that this was just a momentary lapse of reason, it still doesn't explain the rest of it. How in the hell can you explain to me why you would even consider joining the sex club? I demanded. Lena flushed at my accusation and looked away. To me, this was the sticking point. I might be able to accept a one-night stand, but it hurt that she had considered a long-term arrangement. How could she even think about joining these people on a permanent basis? I don't know how to explain it, she said with some trepidation. I wasn't thinking very well. My emotions were all over the place. I was feeling guilty, but I also felt drained from the climax that Max had given me. I was feeling emotional and overwhelmed. When we went out into the living area, the whole situation was strange. I could hear Owen and Sophia going at it in the next room, and then Ella and Ethan came out in their robes, and I realized that all I was wearing was a robe, too. I've never done anything like that before, and I didn't know how to respond. Then they started to tell me this story, and I couldn't believe it. I just sat there, trying to make sense of it all. They must have known what emotions I was feeling. They kept telling me that I had nothing to feel guilty about, that what I had done with Max didn't hurt you or betray you. They were trying to take away my guilt, Lena said and looked at me. Part of me wanted to believe them. If they were right, it would be easier for me to live with what I had done. They were giving me the excuses I needed to justify my behavior. It was easier to deal with my own guilt when they were telling me that everything would be all right. But I still felt guilty and had doubts. When I left, the thing that kept running through my mind was the fact that I cheated on you. Yes, I did think about their offer, and I've already told you it was tempting. I wanted their friendship, and the sex was part of it. I had to decide if it were a price I would pay, but I never decided to do it. Lena looked away for a minute and bit her lip. I have to be honest. Until I spoke to you, I didn't really think everything through. I was just thinking about it from my perspective, how it would affect me. I didn't think about how it would affect you if I lied to you and cheated on you. It wasn't until you told me you loved and trusted me that I realized how selfish I was being. Lena, I need to know, I demanded. You keep on saying the sex wasn't important to you and was a price you would have to pay to be part of this group. What do you mean? You said earlier that you went with Max willingly. You wanted to have sex with him. Lena looked down. You're right. I hate to admit it, but by the time we got into his bedroom, I was ready to have sex with Max. He had gotten me very aroused, and I wanted him as much as he wanted me. He was a perfect gentleman, and the sex was very exciting. He has a lot of experience and made me feel things I have never felt before. I just stared at her. This talk had turned into a nightmare. Not only had my wife cheated on me, but she had also topped off the evening by telling me, in so many words, that Max was a better lover than I was. Now I was hurt both emotionally and in my ego. Lena looked up and saw the expression on my face. Suddenly, she realized what she had just said, and a horrified look crossed her face. She could see how I had taken her words, she could see how her words had affected me. Alan, I never meant to suggest that Max was better than you, she blurted out. Lena took a deep breath and went on. I can't deny that the sex was exciting. It was different from how we make love. Max has a lot more experience than either you or I. He went out of his way to make sure that it was good for me. Sex is a game with him, and he showed me ways to extend the experience and enjoy what was happening. But that doesn't mean I preferred him to making love to you. I don't care how good his technique was, it wasn't the same. I missed the love and closeness I feel when we make love. Sex with Max was just that, a physical act that didn't mean anything emotionally to either of us. It was just about making each other feel good. Please believe me, I never meant to hurt you. This was a mistake that I made. I wasn't looking for another guy to have sex with. I've never been unhappy with you in bed. You are a compassionate and considerate lover that I love to be with. You touch my heart in ways no other man could ever dream of. Sex with him could never compete with making love to you. I wouldn't trade one night with you for 1,000 nights with him. No one could ever replace you in my heart. You are the one that I love and want. Lena stopped for a moment and looked at me. When I said that the sex was a price I would have to pay, I meant that it was not the reason I wanted to join the group. It wasn't what I was looking for. The reason I was so concerned about it was because of what it might do to our marriage. I knew that the others would expect me to continue to have sex with them if I joined the group, and I didn't know if I could do it. Alan, I wasn't out looking for sex with other men. When Lena fell silent, I stared at her. She had dropped some huge bombshells on me tonight, and I was numb, but I was angry, and I didn't trust myself to make a decision right away on what she had told me. I might make a decision that I would regret later. For now, I needed to get away from her. Without a word, I got up and went over to our tent. I grabbed my sleeping pad, separated my sleeping bag from hers, and made a bedroll under the canoe. I couldn't bring myself to even sleep in the same tent with her. Lena watched me silently. When she saw me pulling my gear out of the tent, she sat there with a stricken look on her face. She waited until I was done and then fled into the tent. As I settled in for the night, I could hear her softly sobbing. It was not a restful night for either of us. The next morning, I got up and started to make some coffee. Lena got out of the tent and looked over at me by the fire. She wasn't sure whether she should approach me or not. Finally, she took a deep breath and walked over to the fire. Alan, I know that I hurt you last night, and I'm so sorry. I hate the fact that I destroyed your plans, too. I'll start packing the gear, and we can head back. This was why I didn't want to come, but I just couldn't disappoint you again. Lena turned around and started to walk back to the tent. All of a sudden, my stubborn streak asserted itself. Who said we were going back? I planned a week trip, and that is what we are going to do. You've already screwed me over enough. I'll be damned if you're going to destroy my vacation, too. We're going to finish this trip. Lena stiffened at my words but continued to pack the gear. We ate breakfast and broke camp in silence. I wasn't ready to talk to Lena, and she could see from my icy demeanor that trying to talk would only cause her more problems. Since the first canoe trip we took together, Lena and I have rarely talked while on the water. There was no need, we would enjoy nature in a companionable silence. It brought us together. The mood in the canoe that day was palpably different. The silence that day was not shared, it was a barrier between us. We didn't talk because we had nothing to say to one another. I spent the morning in stony silence, glaring at Lena's back. But anger has its limits. The hours of silence led naturally to contemplation. As the day went on, I couldn't help but think about what she had said the night before. I had to figure out my feelings. What was I going to do? I knew that I loved Lena, but could I forgive her? Did I want to separate from her or ask for a divorce? I had to deal with the knowledge that she had slept with another man had enjoyed her body, which had been my private domain for the past 20 years. Lena had admitted that she was weak and had given into a moment's temptation. Could I forgive her for a one-time transgression? Temptation is an insidious thing. Sometimes, it can be hard to notice as it creeps up on you. All of a sudden, you are faced with a choice. It's easy to get caught up in the moment. You don't think about future consequences, all you think about is the now, what's in front of you. When you're faced with an offer that seems too good to pass up, it's only later that you realize that spur-of-the-moment decisions can have long-lasting consequences. To make matters worse, sometimes circumstances conspire to hide potential consequences, making the temptation even harder to resist. Your emotions take over, or you're forced into a hasty decision. This can be the most dangerous situation of all. When a situation seems too good to be true, human nature asks, what's the catch? You look for the consequences and can avoid the spur-of-the-moment decision. When you can spot the potential consequence, you have a basis on which to make your choice. But if the consequences are hidden, you go with the moment and forget to look for the catch. When you discover the consequences, it might be too late. For example, we have all heard of instances where someone does the right thing and returns a found wallet, a large sum of lost money, or an expensive piece of jewelry. These are situations that are too good to be true. It's easy to spot the consequences that will flow from the decision that is made. You can see the harm that will come to the person who lost the item and the potential consequences if you are caught keeping the money or the item. You can imagine the potential rewards of doing the right thing. There is the temptation to keep the money, but you make your decision with knowledge of the consequence, and this makes it easier to resist. But we have all found a quarter or a dollar on the street and picked it up without a second thought. How much effort do we expend to find the rightful owner? It's not even thought of as a temptation. You don't think about that money belonging to someone else, you just think that it is your lucky day and walk on. For each of us, the line where we stop thinking of it as a lucky find and start thinking about the person who lost the item is drawn in a different place. Lena had given in to Max. She told me she hadn't thought about the consequences before she slept with him. She acted on the spur of the moment and gave in to her emotions, she never looked for the catch. When she did think about the consequences, her reaction was what I would hope she had: deep regrets. When she realized what she had done, she refused to have sex with him again and avoided him for the rest of the expo. As I thought about what Lena had done, I began to consider if there was still a future for us. It hurt to know that she had sex with another man. Lena had touched on the issue of temptation last night and asked me some troubling questions that I had ignored. There have been occasions when I have faced similar temptations. I can understand how hard it is to stay in control. There have been 3 times during my time with Lena that I have faced temptation, with varying degrees of success. Rationally, I could understand how Lena's emotions could have caused her to be unfaithful to me. Rationally, I was pleased that she rejected further involvement as soon as she thought about the potential consequences. But emotionally, I was torn up. All I could see was Lena opening herself up to another man, seriously considering a long-term arrangement. These thoughts made me so angry that I forgot about my own actions. All I wanted to do was scream. I realized that I would have to face up to my emotions if I wanted my marriage to continue. I needed to figure out a way to get past this. By the end of the day, I was emotionally exhausted. We pulled into the bank and started to make camp quietly. I was no longer visibly mad at Lena, I just did not know how to deal with the situation. As Lena pulled my sleeping gear out of the canoe, she looked at me with a question on her face. She didn't know if I was going to share the tent with her or not. I just gestured for her to leave it. I didn't know either. After dinner, I sat there staring into the campfire, brooding. Lena had made a few efforts to start a conversation, but I was withdrawn. I was still trying to make sense of everything. I knew we had to talk, but I wanted to get a handle on my emotions first. What a mess, I exclaimed into the silence. Christ, Lena, how could you do it? How could you mess us up so bad? Lena started to apologize again, but I waved her off. I know, Lena, you're sorry. I'm sorry too, but that doesn't get us anywhere. I shook my head. Look, I thought about this all day long. I think I can even understand how it happened, but god damn it, it hurts. I just can't get the picture of that guy doing you out of my head. I glanced over at Lena in frustration. Sometimes I wish you never told me. I believe you when you say that it's not going to happen again. I know he doesn't mean anything to you. You handled the situation yourself, so why didn't you just keep quiet? There's nothing I can do about it now, so what's the use in telling me? Lena looked at me in shock. She couldn't understand how I could even think that not knowing would be preferable to living with the image of her with someone else burned into my mind. I had to tell you. We have to deal with this. Ignoring what happened is not going to make it go away. If I didn't tell you about this, it would just make it worse. You know I can never hide anything from you. Hell, you figured out that something was wrong over the phone. You would have seen that I was feeling guilty about something as soon as I got home. You would have gotten mad because I was hiding something from you, and it would cause even more problems. It would have been a lot worse for both of us if you found out from someone else that I cheated on you. My lying would have made it worse. Lena stared at me with a sad look in her eyes. Besides, I know how terrible it feels to be in the dark, to know something happened but not what, to be humiliated by hearing what happened from someone else. Lena looked over at me with a worried expression. What happens now? I don't know, Lena. We both have a lot to think about. I know that I still love you, and my mind is telling me to forgive you, but it's still too soon. I'm still hurting too much to forgive you right now. I paused, struggling with my thoughts. Lena, I'm scared. Something is wrong with our marriage, and I don't know how to fix it. We both love each other, but why do we keep screwing up? If our marriage is so happy, why are we so open to temptation? Neither of us resisted too hard when we were offered something different. You told me last night that you wanted the whole package. It wasn't the sex that attracted you but the fun the group was having. Tonight you tell me that this fun included flirting and acting like you were out on a date with Max. That scares me worse than the fact you had sex with him. You were out looking for something that he was giving you. It makes me feel like you're bored and looking for ways to replace me. Hell, you liked the romance. Lena gaped at me and shook her head in denial, but I had developed a full head of steam. I know you love me and don't want to divorce me, but let me ask you this: what would have happened if the sex didn't happen, and they just asked you to join this social club at the expo every year? Would you have done it? I didn't wait for her answer. Think about that, Lena. If you feel the need to find excitement by dating some other guys, what does that say about our marriage and me? Lena just sat there with tears in her eyes. She started to speak, but I stopped her. Not tonight, Lena. We're both too tired to deal with this anymore tonight. Besides, we both have some thinking to do. Let's go to bed and talk about this some more tomorrow night. Lena nodded her acceptance and got up to walk to the tent. After a few steps, she stopped with a question. Alan, where are you sleeping tonight? I'll sleep in the tent, but, Lena, I'm not ready to cuddle with you or share a sleeping bag. The rest of that canoe trip was intense. By day, we would paddle in silence, each of us thinking about the prior night's conversation. No, the silence wasn't shared, but it was no longer a barrier between us. It was a start. At night, we sat and discussed our marriage. We talked about what was right and what was wrong and how we could work to fix it. We were both scared. Lena's confession had opened a big can of worms that needed to be dealt with. We had not worked on our relationship with the care and concern that we had spent on our kids, our jobs, or the rest of our lives. We had drifted along, thinking everything was okay without looking ahead. Yes, we cuddled and talked at night, but we weren't spending enough time together. I wasn't giving Lena the romance she needed outside the bedroom. We had fallen into a parent trap. We hadn't thought about ourselves for a long time. Our lives were tied up in Noah and Emma and outside interests. Even our canoe trips and hikes had taken a backseat to more pressing concerns. We talked about what would happen in a few years when the kids left home for college. We had better start working on us if we were going to be ready for the empty nest. We also figured out that my earlier problems had indirectly affected Lena's actions at the expo. Lena didn't act out of boredom. Subconsciously, she acted with the belief that there would be minimal consequences for her behavior. We talked a lot about consequences. In her failure to communicate fully, we understood that our marriage was on shaky ground. The trust had been eroded on both sides. One further slip by either of us could end it, no matter how much we loved one another. We promised ourselves that we would continue to talk and work on bridging the gap that had been created. We also promised that we would both think about the consequences of our actions. We agreed to never do anything apart that we wouldn't do in front of each other. And we talked about sex. Even though sex had never been the raison d'etre for our marriage, we had neglected it for too long. We had gotten into a rut, settling for simply satisfying each other, never trying to bring it to the next level. We decided it was time to change our mindset. It wasn't that we wanted to get wild and try exotic new things, but we decided it couldn't hurt to spice it up a little. At the very least, we needed to slow down and take our time. I wanted to give Lena the fireworks she had seen with Max, and she wanted to see how she could make my climax more intense as well. It wasn't a fun week. At times, my anger would come to the forefront, and I would lash out at Lena. At times, she lashed out at me as well. Many nights ended in tears, but we kept at it. It may not have been fun, but it was necessary. I learned a big lesson that week. I could have focused entirely upon my anger and blamed Lena for what had happened. I could have spent the week berating her for her stupidity and for sleeping with Max. I could have given in to the temptation to focus on the immediate problem and avoid looking at the big picture. But I didn't. I chose to look beyond the immediate problem to find the source. I chose to fix what was wrong with our marriage. I remained angry with Lena, but I tried to channel that anger into something that would help both of us in the long run. By the end of the week, I was sharing a sleeping bag with Lena again. I wasn't ready to have sex with her yet, but it did feel good to hold her in my arms again. Truth be known, I enjoyed cuddling with Lena as much as she enjoyed it. I knew that eventually my anger would fade, and I would be ready to take our relationship back, but first I had to get the image of Lena and Max out of my mind. By the time we paddled back to the car on Saturday, I had reached a conclusion. For my own ego, I needed to meet Max. I had to face down the men who had slept with my wife. Lena wasn't too happy with the idea. She had seen the progress we had made and was afraid that seeing Max would just set me off again. She was also worried about what I might do. She was concerned that I would confront Max or let his wife, Claire, know about what had happened. She felt miserable about the possibility that she would be involved in the destruction of Max's marriage. I told her that I needed her to trust me. I wasn't interested in destroying Max's marriage. I didn't want to go macho and threaten him to stay away from Lena. I didn't even plan to tell Claire about Max's extracurricular activities. But I did want to teach him a lesson, and I needed to make sure that he knew that Lena was mine and mine alone. Facing down Max was the first step in making a decision about the invitation to join the Regional Events Committee. We had spent a lot of time last night talking about whether Lena should accept the invitation. Lena wanted to reject it, she didn't want the threat to our marriage, and she felt uncomfortable about the invitation. She felt it had been offered to her under false pretenses, she hadn't earned it. I wasn't so sure. While I did worry about the time she would have to spend away from home, I knew that if our marriage were to survive, we needed to learn to trust each other again. I couldn't keep her at home forever. Besides, I was proud of her, even if she didn't think she deserved to be on the committee, I did. I wanted her to have the forum for her ideas. I just wanted to make sure that her work on the committee didn't affect our marriage. I wanted to make sure that she wouldn't face peer pressure to get back together with Ella, Max, and the gang. My plan was relatively simple. I wanted to keep Max off balance. I wanted to meet with him without him being sure what I knew. I would confront him on his own turf because I wanted his wife present. I hoped that I might be able to give him a taste of his own medicine. When I explained to Lena what I wanted to accomplish, she reluctantly agreed to help me. Although Lena didn't like it, she was willing to trust me. We packed the car and drove toward Max's hometown. That night, we stopped at a motel, and Lena called Max's house. She explained that we were on our way back from a trip and wanted to meet with him because we had questions about the committee. She told me later that he sounded surprised to hear from her. I think he had expected her to reject the invitation. Reluctantly, he agreed to meet with us the next day after lunch. He was even more reluctant when Lena told him that I had specifically asked if Claire could be there too. She said he got alarmed at that but couldn't press her for details because I made sure he could hear me in the background. All she told him was that I wanted to talk to Claire as well. I hoped it worried him. I wouldn't mind if he had a sleepless night wondering if the truth was about to hit the fan. When we pulled up to Max's house, he came out to greet us. Max reminded me of countless jocks that I have known throughout the years. He had the look and the attitude of a big man around campus. He was about 4 or 5 inches taller than I was and looked to be in fairly good shape. When I got out of the car, he looked me over and dismissed me as a physical threat. I'm used to it. I'm short and thin. More than one jock has underestimated me through the years, and often their attitude toward me caused them to underestimate me in all areas. I was counting on Max to do the same. I would take any advantage I could get. His smile was forced and uncomfortable. He wasn't used to facing the husbands of his playmates. I wanted to make him sweat as long as I could, so I shook his hand and looked him in the eye. I stared at him for a moment without letting go of his hand. "So, you're Max," I said. "Lena has told me all about the expo. I wanted to meet the men who spent so much time with my wife." My comments were made in a neutral tone. I wanted him wondering just how much Lena had told me. Max studied my face for a moment, trying to figure out what I knew. I kept my best poker face, and he glanced away nervously and escorted us to the patio. We were just sitting down when Claire came out with a tray of drinks. If Max was your typical jock, Claire was the girl next door. She had a friendly, open face and a personality that made you want to like her immediately. She was the type of woman who would be attractive to the guy who preferred Mary Ann to Ginger or Betty over Veronica. In short, she was cute, not beautiful. I think Max was surprised when Lena and I started out by asking him legitimate questions about the committee. We did have concerns, and we saw no reason not to get the answers. After a while, he started to relax, convinced that Lena hadn't told me what had happened. I caught him giving Lena a few speculative glances, wondering if she had changed her mind about the extracurricular activities. I decided it was time to shift the focus. Thanks for answering our questions, Max. When we were discussing whether Lena should accept the invitation, we realized that we needed more information, and you've helped a lot. But there is one aspect of the committee that I am very concerned about, and I hope that both you and Claire can help us out. Claire looked puzzled. I'm not sure how I can help. I don't know anything about how the committee works. It's not the committee I'm worried about, Claire, I replied. It's the rest of it. I'm concerned about the amount of time Lena will be away from home. That was why I wanted to talk to you. I don't want our marriage to be affected by our jobs. I wanted to talk to another spouse about what it's like. Lena told me the committee meets 4 times a year, and she'd have to be away for about 3 weeks a year. I don't want to pry, but has this caused any problems for you and Max? How have you been able to handle the separation? Although Max looked uncomfortable, Claire smiled. It hasn't been a problem. Of course, I miss him, but I know it's something that he needs to do for his job. But don't you ever get jealous? I got jealous of Lena by the 3rd day she was at the expo. She was done by 2:30 every day and off doing something every night. She was out at parties, having a good time. I got jealous of all the time she was spending dancing and socializing with the guys at the expo. How do you deal with all the partying that goes on? Max shot me a dirty look. I hadn't accused him of anything, but I was bringing the conversation into dangerous territory. I was raising questions he didn't want asked, but there was no way he could stop it without looking suspicious. Claire looked troubled. What do you mean? What parties? I smiled to myself. I had suspected that Max hadn't been overly forthcoming with the details of what he was doing while he was away. I couldn't see how he could have been and remained happily married. From what Lena had told me, the social group had been going strong for years. That was something I could tell her about. For now, I would keep quiet about the sex, but it was time she learned about the fun Max had while he was away. I told Claire what Lena had done at the expo. I told her about all of the afternoon activities, the dinners, the parties, and the receptions. I didn't lay it on thick or accuse anyone of doing anything improper, but I didn't hide the fact that Lena and Max had spent a lot of time together outside the meetings. Claire already knew that Max was part of a social group from the committee that did a lot together. She just wasn't aware that half of the group were women. Claire didn't look too happy. She was shooting angry looks at both Lena and Max. Lena looked uncomfortable but didn't look away from Claire's gaze. Max just sat there with a stunned look on his face. Some of his secrets had come home to roost, and he knew he had a lot of explaining to do. That's why I was jealous, Claire. Lena was out having a great time, and I was stuck at work. From what Lena told me, the committee meetings are the same. The meetings get done mid-afternoon, and they all get together to socialize for the rest of the time. Even though I trust Lena, it doesn't mean that I like it when she's out with some guy I don't know. I shot Max a pointed glance and smiled before turning back to Claire. You didn't know about this? Max was halfway to his feet and started to babble some kind of explanation, but Claire got up and stormed from the room without a backward glance. A few seconds later, I heard a door slam in the rear of the house. Max looked over at me with an angry look on his face. What the hell was that about? Are you trying to screw up my marriage? He snarled. I was going to ask you the same thing, I replied mildly. All I did was tell her what went on, something you should have done a long time ago. You're the one who was with my wife. Max tried to bluff his way through. I don't know what you're talking about. I responded forcefully. Lena told me about the expo, Max. She told me everything. I know you were flirting with her and how you got paired up at the parties on Tuesday and Friday. I lowered my voice and continued, she told me about Saturday night too, Max. She told me about what went on in the hospitality suite. I know you had sex with her. The color drained from Max's face, and he looked over to Lena for confirmation. She didn't look too pleased either. The fact that he had failed to tell Claire anything bothered her. She was beginning to rethink her opinion of Mr. Max Foster. Max started to deny the accusation but then slumped back down in his chair, defeated. What do you want? He asked wearily. Just don't tell Claire. She'd kill me if she finds out. What do I want? I responded sarcastically. Can you put my marriage back the way it was? Maybe you can tell me why I should care about your marriage when you obviously didn't care about mine. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt your marriage, Max replied desperately. It didn't mean anything. We were just having fun. I wasn't looking to have an affair with her or anything. No, you just wanted to have sex with her. You don't think that didn't affect my marriage? Tell you what, if it doesn't mean anything, I'll take Claire back home with me for the week and just have some fun with her. I'm sure you won't mind, after all, it will just be sex, right? Max's eyes blazed at this suggestion, and I gave a bitter laugh. What's the matter, Max? It doesn't seem so innocent when you're the one who has to sit at home, does it? If it didn't mean anything, you wouldn't mind if Claire did it too. Alan, give me any nonsense about it not meaning something. If you're going to mess around with someone else's wife, it means something. What the hell is wrong with you anyway? I demanded. Why are you screwing around when you have a wife like Claire at home? Alan, you know she's going to find out sooner or later. If you keep on messing around on her, she's going to get hurt. If you love her like you said, you'll think about what you're doing and stop it. Lena had been watching the interplay with interest and decided to chime in. I can't believe that I almost listened to you. I was ready to trust you when you told me that it wouldn't affect my marriage. I didn't know that your marriage was built on not telling Claire anything. I hope she tears you a new one. I only want one thing from you, Max, stay away from me. Max slumped his head and nodded his acceptance. Are you going to tell Claire? He pleaded. Lena and I looked at each other for a minute, and I finally shook my head. No, I'll keep your secret for now. Claire seems like a nice woman, and I don't want her to get hurt. But if you ever come near Lena in the future or try to get back at her, telling Claire is just a small part of what I will do to you. Let's get out of here, Lena. As we left the house, Max sat there with his head in his hands. I didn't want to ruin his marriage, I just wanted him to learn the consequences of fooling around with my wife. The rest was up to him. I didn't plan on giving him any more thought, I had my own marriage to save. Lena and I did make it, although it took time to get our marriage back to where it had been. Trust is a hard thing to earn and easy to lose. It took time before I was able to trust Lena in social situations when I wasn't there. I didn't worry about her looking for trouble, I worried about her getting blindsided again. But in time, she showed me that she had learned her lesson. I learned it, too. We knew the consequences of screwing up, and they were scary enough that neither of us wanted to tempt fate by giving in. Lena did join the regional events committee. Together, we decided that it was too good of a career opportunity for her to pass up. But we addressed the social aspects and minimized her time away from the family and me. Lena discovered that it was usually possible to condense the committee meeting trips. The winter meeting became an annual family trip to the capital. We also realized that the kids and I could vacation near the resort where the annual expo was held. As for Max, Ella, and the rest, their social group didn't last too much longer. The members started to drop out rapidly. Ella and Ethan were the first two to leave. It turned out that they had gotten together on a more permanent basis and were planning on getting married. All of a sudden, the idea of maintaining a friends with benefits relationship with Max, Ivy, and the rest didn't seem so innocent anymore. Max had a change of heart as well. Lena and I scared him when we showed up at his house. He followed our lead and started to bring Claire and his family to the expos and meetings. I would see them around occasionally, but for some reason, he never wanted to come over to say hi. With half of the group gone, things weren't as much fun for Ivy, Jack, Owen, and Sophia. It was also more difficult to hide what was going on. I heard rumors of a confrontation between Sophia's husband and Owen a few years later, but the matter was hushed up. Sophia did resign from the committee rather abruptly, however. Lena and I are finding more time to spend together. Emma's a junior now and is starting to think about college. With Noah already in college, we think we are ready to deal with the empty nest. We are looking forward to the chance to spend more time together. Thanks for watching. Could you forgive betrayal? Share your thoughts and subscribe for more.